Vatican and they didn't get the Pope's handprints, but they got people that were right next to the Pope's handprints. And that was kind of phenomenal, because
Absolutely.
reading hands isn't exactly something that they encourage. So it was wonderful that this guy was open and willing to have his hands read, and being able to look at his hands and handprints. And I didn't guess his exact work, but the theme of what he did and how he went about it, and the idea of ritual and his spirituality, it all showed through in his hands. So that, and there were several other projects, several other people, and it's fun being tested like that. It's kind of a challenge, but it's fun.
Do you now? I know that there is at what trimester is it that the lines in a baby's palm start to begin? Do you know that?
It's really at the very beginning of the second trimester, at the end of the first. At the 7 weeks after conception, you've got little tiny hands that are pretty much the same ratio. The bones aren't really there. It's more of a kind of a tendon, softer tissue, but what is going to be the bones, the ratio of them doesn't change throughout life. So they're just miniature at that point, but they're tiny little hands. And the lifeline starts to show first, and that's about 8 weeks after conception. And then the heart line, about another week or two, will start to appear. And the headline forms at around 13, 14 weeks after conception. So each of these lines that we're reading in people's hands about themselves have
been there forever.
Yes.
Before they were even in this earth.
Right. As we are becoming, as these cells are clustering together and becoming a little human, our character, our personality, our preferences, how we function in so many ways is already in there.
Patti, have you heard that scientifically there are more and more studies on pan shapes and lines, and that how many of these studies are starting to show that there is a lot of relevance?
I think, well, it's measurements. Many of them are doing, the researchers are doing measurements of hands, and like the fingers. We'll talk a little bit about the lengths of the fingers of the candidates. And
the first thing, who do we think of?
Yes. Which one? So we've always, in palmistry, looked at the ring finger when it's extra long as being more of a kind of a gambler, wild, risk-taking. And that's basically what science has proven. They've done it by measuring or comparing the measurement of the index finger to the ring finger. That's that 2D, 4D. So measuring one and the other and dividing one into the other, and whichever one's just a little bit longer than the other dominates. Or now, we saw it as dominating. They see it as how much testosterone was in the womb at the time of development.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And what about the thumb? Now, when I studied palm reading, the longer the thumb was in proportion to the first joint, or the bottom joint of the finger, was also significant of leadership. Do you go by that or not? I learned all of my palm reading from some of the books in the 80s and 90s as well.
So I see the index finger more relating to leadership and authority and how we deal with telling people what to do and being told what to do. I see the thumb more as will, determination,
common sense, but also length as well. At least from I'm not sure. I'm sure that different palm reading teachers teach differently. I know that in India, they read palmistry almost totally different, don't they?
Well, they actually have books just on the thumb, all by itself, just the thumb.
Yeah, and that's what I've heard, that the thumb itself in some countries is far more significant than any other part of the hand. What do you tell people, and I'm sure you have these as well, the ones that have just a part of a lifeline? What do you say to people about that? Because I know there are people that have short lifelines, which is the bottom line, or that. Can you talk about the lifeline?
Well, you're talking about the line that wraps around the thumb. this one that goes around the thumb. And short lifelines might come to right about there, but usually there's another line overlapping or on one side or the other that continues on with a little bridge from one line to the other connecting the two, kind of showing the redirection. And often it's the career line or the fate line that takes over. So I see both of those as either or is fine, that if the fate line is taken over for the lifeline and continues on, usually that person is living a productive life, or being productive and being seen as productive is very important to them. So I don't feel that, usually there really isn't just a partial lifeline. That is so rare. There's most likely another piece continuing on. Do you have a missing lifeline? You look down at
No, no,
yours.
no. Mine goes all the way around my thumb. But I'm talking about when I'm at Renaissance fairs and reading, or at proms when I got hired to read palms at proms. Some people would have only half of a lifeline. I'm going by what you know, because I already know what I know, and I'm more interested in the way you read. Another thing that I've always found is some people have very deep lines and some people have very fine lines. What would you say the reasoning for that is?
Well, I find the fine lines are in people that think. So they'll come into a space and they've got lots of thoughts on their mind. Or the more lines, the more their mind is thinking, and words, thoughts, ideas are going through them. So it's hard for them to totally be quiet and have nothing going on in their heads. Where the deeper lines are feelings and emotions. So when you look at a person's hands and it's full of deep, deep lines, lots of deep, deep lines, they feel something all the time. And their feelings are very deep. It's hard for them to just shrug off their emotions, but they're not thinking all the time. They can shut that off. And then the others with the really fine lines, they have that nonstop thinking, whereas they don't always, they think they're feeling, but it's really much more thought going on and ideas and analyzing.
And when I learned palm reading, so I just sharing ideas. The more hand lines there were in the hand. I'll give an instance. I was reading at the Renaissance Fair last summer, and this woman came in she was incredibly worn out looking, and she wasn't that old. And her hand was just filled with lines, just filled. And I could tell right away that she was an adventurer that was a burnout.
Too many lines can be stress, yes.
Well, it can also be somebody that's lived a very, very stressful life, or somebody that's lived a very full life. And what I learned was that it also can signify a full hand, like is just a life of emotion, a life of adventure, a life of good and bad events, that sometimes it just gets all wrapped up in all this stuff. And that the lighter the lines are, the more faint the lines are. I was taught that a lot of that is relevant to, it doesn't matter as much how short your lifeline is, for instance, as much as how deep it is. Do you live a quality life, a life to the fullest? Or are you a thinker and a cerebral person that tends to live, like you say, your life in thoughts and analyzing?
I would see that as well. The deeper the line, the longer lasting the thoughts and the feelings, the more meaningful. Mm-hmm. I was noticing how deep Donald Trump's lines are. I've got the pictures all and notes all around me.
Okay, should we do Donald Trump's hand? He's
Want
always
to
a
start with
character and always really fun. And you and I are both liberals, but I still get a kick out of him.
Okay.
I wonder if Mr. Bill could put Donald Trump's hand up. There we are.
Go. Well, I love that one up there in the upper right-hand corner when he's looking at his fingers, saying that his fingers are long. Well, his fingers are not long. His fingers are short, and short fingers are on people that are usually business people, good with money, good with thinking fast in general. They have the tendency to see a big picture rather than the details. And it's interesting, he always says, I've got people he can delegate work
Mm.
to. So he sees himself as the mind, or the one that thinks it out, and other people act it out. But he also has short headlines. They stop there's a mercury line or a health line that runs kind of diagonal from the little finger, kind of under the little finger towards the base of the hand on the thumb side. Most people have one if people are listening and looking at their own hands. And his headline tends to, in the pictures that I found, stop pretty much at that line. And that shows he trusts his gut feelings. He makes a lot of decisions based on just trusting himself. And he said he has a good mind. He listens to himself. And then
Right.
his heart line curves very tightly. It appears under the middle finger, so he can be controlling. We already know that, but in relationships, possessive. Um, and there's a very narrow space between his head and heart lines, especially under the middle finger. So he often, well, he orders people around and says they will do what I say. And I often say when I see it that close, it's my way or the highway. And that's his attitude. But at the same time, his career or fate line, whichever way you want to call that, in one of the hands, and I can't see it in the pictures right now, goes through the headline. And if it goes through the headline, that means you can follow directions and be told what to do. So there is a part of him that will listen to others and listen to advice, that he isn't totally only listening to himself. So I think when he draws these other people, his advisors in, the people that do all the details for him, that he listens to them. And regarding, go ahead.
I wanted to add that if I were reading Donald's hand, of course, the little finger stands for communication. The ring finger stands for creativity. The big middle finger stands for business. And the pointer finger stands for spirituality. And he also has a hitchhiker thumb, which says, funny to me, it always says, I'm out of here if it's not going good. And he's had, what, 3 or 4 bankruptcies, or not bankrupt, what do you call it? Yeah, bankruptcies. So he does get out of it when it's not good. The other thing I noticed is that his creativity finger bows in towards his business finger. So that seems to say that his creativity is all about business. Another thing I noticed is that in his flanges of his fingers, and when I read palmistry, the top flange stands for intuition. The middle flange stands for um, intellect, and the bottom one stands for money making. And almost all of his fingers, the bottom flange is the longer one, which indicates that he has a real natural gift for money making
And materializing his ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to read the fingers as the tips, you get an idea, the middle, you plan it out, and the base, you make it happen. And whichever one's longer or shorter is how much time you spend in that area.
And he may have gotten the impression that he does have large hands just by the fact that his palm is almost longer than his fingers are.
Yeah, his palms are huge. Very hands-on person.
And so, yeah, is that what that means to you?
Well, I think he's got his hands on whatever he's doing. Well, he's got his name on everything.
Yeah, he does. He sure does. All right. Well, anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I would see the bending back thumb is similar to what you say, but also that doing things on the spur of the moment, but mostly when he wants to do them on the spur of the moment. So when he wants to do something in the moment, he does it.
I would also say that his thumb, when you have, what does it mean when you have a dropped thumb like that? Because there are some people that do not have that dropped lower thumb.
I would say impetuous. You mean the tip, the way it bends back like that? Or what do you...
the knuckle base.
Kind of where there's a bump at the knuckle?
Yeah. What do you say about the bump
it's supposed to be rhythm and timing, but I see it a lot to relate to a certain type of diplomacy and tact, which he doesn't have, but he does have a big bump there. So forget the diplomacy and tact, huh?
Yeah, well, maybe he's just a good dancer. Not on Saturday Night Live, though, but that was just a funny one. Yeah, so I think that's we've got more to go to, and I think maybe that's good for now. What do you think?
Okay, let's
Okay,
try another one.
so maybe we should discuss some other qualities that people may be looking for in their hands. Um, One of the things that so many people want to know is about soulmates. Where would you
Mhm.
say that people can find their soulmate lines?
Well, I'm not quite sure there is a soulmate line. I used to say that. To back up a little bit, you've mentioned books and learning from books, and behind me is like 3 shelves of books in this bookcase of just palmistry books, but I haven't read that many of them, and I, I collect them. I like
Uh-huh.
having them. And I do look through them and I thumb through them and I compare different meanings from time to time. But there was a certain point when I got into the development of hands, I moved a little bit away from meanings into more the psychology and the motivation. What motivates a person? Why do they do what they do? So that's what I've looked for in these people's hands. And you'd mentioned soulmate.
Well,
You want to go
you had me look at Cruz's
to?
marriage line. So, okay, call it a marriage line, whatever you want to call it. Where do
Okay.
they look for that?
Well, that's on the side of the hand. Let's see. Find my camera here. Put my hand up.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know if you
yeah.
can
It's
see it.
kind of
I'm
put
not
it in front of your
there. There we
lens.
go. I'm on the wrong
Yeah,
side. Right in here. Let's see. Turn my hand sideways and go
little
right
finger,
there. Yeah.
side of the lower
It's not
little finger.
reflecting what I'm doing.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
supposed to reflect what I'm doing, but it's not. Somebody else is in the
Yeah.
camera besides me. Okay, it's under the little finger and it's the horizontal line, the first horizontal. Wait a minute. I can almost see it there. It's the first horizontal line
It's like a
under
baby
the
finding
little
their
finger.
hand, aren't you?
Yeah, I gotta find my hand here in the picture.
Only
And
it's the
then
camera.
beside me. If I put it in front of my
There,
face,
there you got it. There you got it.
there we
There
go.
you
Okay.
got it.
This is my face is on camera. So
Uh-huh.
the marriage line is, I mean, the heart line's here, and then there's a marriage line above it, usually. Anyway, that is an interesting line to talk about. If it's really deep, cuts in, looks almost as deep as the heart line, that's commitment, that's bonding, that's someone that will surrender in a relationship, get into becoming one with someone or best friends forever. There's a commitment there and an openness. If that line's real thin, that same kind of bonding and commitment's not there. And if the line doesn't go towards the back of the hand and just kind of stays in the front, then that's more outer qualities and superficial kind of one night stands and for looks, wanting to go out with someone and be seen with someone. So the farther it goes back to the back of the hand, the more that it's a deep bond, as well as the more you're willing to commit. And the more it's in the front, the more it's about being seen, outer qualities. And I don't really want to just say that's superficial, because that can also show that you recognize your tribe. You know who your people are by the way they dress, by the way they look, their style. So it's kind of that visual, I know you, your kin, or your kindred spirit when you just see someone. So that outer one isn't totally just a superficial relationship, but it shows that that's what you can become attracted to. So when I look
Can a
at
person
this,
have so if so you do you count lines then on that? Like could person have more than one bonding line? Do you count that the little
don't really
lines on the
count
side
how
or
many.
not?
I tend to think of the top one as the more mate, you're the one that you're really bonding with, and the lower ones can be best friends or old relationships that there's still a little bit of connection, but it doesn't have to be old relationships. So I don't want people looking at them and thinking it's like, oh, that's my first husband and that's my second. I don't feel you can even count them that way. I think that if you have just one main one and you've been married 3 times, that same line counts for that, all of those marriages. That's how you
Okay.
act when you're married.
Okay. Okay. So how about the healing lines? Do you count healing lines?
Well, I guess you would be talking about under my face. These lines that are
Under
more
the little,
under,
those
yeah,
would
the
be
vertical
vertical,
lines there. Yeah.
the
Um,
vertical lines.
I changed my attitude about them after really spending time studying Mother Teresa. And there's stories out there about, what a wonderful person she was, but also that she wasn't totally perfect. There was a little bit of selfishness going on and selecting
Sure.
how much healing you got and how much suffering you continued to carry. So the more I've looked at the healer's marks, the more I see it as something within self. Self wants to fix things or heal things or make it all better. It's hard to be comfortable if you see something out there that needs to be fixed, and that can be other people, it can be things. So it's a
So,
desire.
so a person that has chosen massage or Reiki or anything like that, is there any significant marks that would indicate that that is what their mission is?
I, well, I see people who want to heal and comfort others. They would have the healer's marks. They would likely have empathy lines, the half circular kind of lines that form under the index finger. They really wouldn't have to have psychic lines, but a good health line, connecting lifeline towards the little finger would show they can trust their instincts, trust their gut feelings. The fine lines all over the hands would just show sensitivity to what's going on around them. And the deeper lines, if they had them, would show how much they took into themselves and
Okay.
felt with empathy.
Okay. So, how about we look, Mr. Bill, at Bernie Sanders' hand?
I think his hands look comfortable. They're kind of gangly. Gangly is the first word I think whenever I see his. Just easygoing. And
He uses his hands like a conductor.
yeah, the way they're both out there and the
Every
fingers
word
are
he says,
graceful.
he conducts with a rhythm with his hands.
He's a joy to watch with his hands.
Yes, he
He's
is.
like giving, and all those little pads and little pointy things on his fingertips. Just the energy is kind of coming out. One of the things that's different of his hands than the others is his heart line. He has a humanitarian heart line. So one part
Oh,
of it forks, and one part will go up between the index and the middle finger, and the other part branch kind of goes straight out. And when it does that, kind of going straight across the hand like that, that's a love for all people, not just singling individuals and groups or organizations out to be loyal to or to care about, but this care for everybody, wanting everybody to do good. So he's sincere in where he's coming from when he wants the people to benefit, wants everybody to have $15 minimum wage.
he seems to have somebody, he seems to, as the people from India always say, the long palm with the long fingers are often people that are very intuitive.
And very spiritual, yeah.
So he seems to have a very spiritual hand.
And if you look at the base of the thumb, there's a lot of deep lines rising up the hand from the base. Now, part of that is he's older, but when those lines are there, that shows a person feels like there's a purpose to their lives, a reason for being here. So with that heart line and those lines, there is this really strong wanting to make a difference. And there's his headline and heart line are real close together under the middle fingers as well. So I see him as a person with strong preferences, but his preferences seem to be towards wanting other people to benefit and not just themselves. And
What I notice especially is how his middle finger, which is business, bows in towards spirituality.
I saw that. Well, I see that finger as like the idea of right and wrong, what you believe in and what you value. And I did wonder about how he does hold that one either kind of separate from the others or bent in to be almost equal to the others. And I
It just
wonder about that. That's a kind of
to me it looks like
humbleness.
somebody that could have been either a minister or a psychic, or could have been a person doing what he's doing, humanitarian.
Yeah.
But it looks very much like a humanitarian hand.
And I think he has the strength to implement. implement a lot of the things that he says. A lot of people says, well, he won't be able to make it happen. Well, I think he has that ability. He has that conviction, and he has the desire, and it's coming from the heart. He's the only one I think that has a downward bending headline too. The others have straighter headlines. So he's the only one with an imagination or a visual,
I
being
call
able to
that the
visualize
ADD line.
himself.
I have it as well. I call that the ADD line. Somebody that has to multitask, somebody that has to do 3 or 4 or 5 things at once. But
Well, he's
also it
holding
is
up
a
really good for his
sensitivity too.
age and as active as he is right now.
Hmm. Yeah, for his age, he's doing being very active. Anything else that you can specifically point out?
Let's see if I have anything on my notes here. Basically, the full moon. Okay, the moon side of his hand. I made a note there, where the rest of his hand seems to be kind of like more caved in looking or more wrinkled up, but the area around in some of the pictures that I found, like on the little finger side, that whole kind of fleshy area. It's called the hypothenar area, or we call it the moon and Mars and Pluto's
Right.
along that side there. That's really full. And when I see that area is full on people, that tells me there's a certain kind of nurturing, that they don't expect immediate results, that it's like gardening. They plant seeds and they know it's going to take time for things to grow and become. So they don't expect immediate gratification or immediate results. And that would go with the long downward bending headline too, that ability to let things play out rather than demanding it happen instantly. The others are more instant, needing for instant gratification.
Well, let's look at an example of how that differs. Mr. Bill, if we could please have Ted Cruz. How does Ted Cruz differ?
Hand.
He has beautiful hands. Nice I was noticing that as well.
And I was definitely, since he's being called Lying Ted and there's all the rumors, I was looking very closely to see if I would, what I would see there. He doesn't have some of the features that would make you think of a person that would bend the truth.
Yeah, he really doesn't have an exaggerated bow in his little finger.
And actually, it's a very long, straight little finger. That's eloquence and communication. Mm-hmm. So he loves, we already know he loves to talk, but that would add to the love of talking. But his heart lines stop, they may go farther, but the deepest part of them stop pretty much centered under the middle finger. And that can be good in some areas, like working in an emergency room. It helps you kind of keep from being emotional in the moment. But at the same time, it can come across as kind of cold, distant, not very warm.
Which is his problem, is that nobody likes him.
And looks like a very deep vertical line that is under the middle finger that I would normally see as someone that enjoys learning and wisdom. But it doesn't go all the way down his hand. It attaches itself to the heart line, making a very deep. It doesn't make the heart line. It doesn't become part of the heart line, but since they're attached, there is that appearance. But it makes it a very sharp rise up to the middle finger from the heart line right there. So since I read the middle finger as having to do with judgment as well as wisdom and learning, I would think that there's something about what he knows as being important. And then underneath that, his heart and headline are very, very close together like the others, so he's narrow-minded. And there's a tension in the heart line that emphasizes that. Like the heart line's even deeper under the middle finger area. So there's an intensity to his emotional beliefs when it comes to the right and wrong of them, as I would see it. And I
would add to that also, looking at his fingers. When I learned palm reading, it says loners, or people that seem to like the company of just one or two people in their life, often have a large separation between their little finger and their ring finger. And
Right,
it
and he holds it
seems
that
to me
way.
that he seems to have a large space between that, which indicates to me that probably his wife or his family are his best friends. And he's not really somebody that needs a lot of friends.
Right. And when we looked at his marriage line, it was actually frayed as it went towards the back. And usually, if it's going to branch, it does it towards the front. So that's kind of unusual.
What does
Um,
that mean?
I don't have a meaning for that, but anything that splits is kind of divided. So and fizzled out when something kind of breaks into little lines rather than one solid, clear one. So something is fizzling out, breaking down. So, I would feel that
He's
he doesn't have the bond that his wife wishes he had with her.
Oh, interesting. One of the things I've noticed in at least in the hand in the upper right, the palm seems to be, I don't know, would you call that oblong or square? Because at first I was going to say it's very square, but it seems to be, because oblong would indicate he has a really strong eye for detail, but square seems to be very hands-on, likes to get in the dirt and the grit and the nitty-gritty of stuff, and he seems to have actually more of an oblong palm, I would say.
Yeah, and the left, especially the right, I would see it closer to square, but the left, depending on which picture we look at, actually both of
More
them
of the
that's in the
pictures show
samples.
him as a very square-handed palm.
The lower right one.
Well, the lower ones, well, maybe the lower right one makes him look more oblong as well. I always tell people that have very square hands that they tend to be the square palm, that they tend to be the hands-on person that sometimes does all the work, even for the freeloaders, and that one of the things that they have a very difficult time with is telling people to shove off, and that one of the lessons that a square palm person needs to learn in life is how not to take on all of the hard work from the freeloaders in life, whereas an oblong person does not usually have that problem. But it's hard to tell with him with these hands. I can't really tell.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. What I noticed in the one in the lower right, I don't know if you can see it in the screen as clearly. Maybe I'll upload these to one of the Facebook pages later so people can see the hands in more detail. But he has the sun line. Can you see that anywhere on
Not on the, I
the
can't with
right
the little
hand?
screen, but probably with a bigger YouTube screen, I would be able to see that.
When I think of what motivates him, since his ring finger is the thicker of the fingers, if you can tell,
Hmm.
at least in some of the pictures, and so I feel the ring fingers emphasized in that. You see that finger's creativity, and I see it also as environment, space you're in, how you project yourself out of your space, and with that talent line or that sun line going right up there and that finger kind of in my mind dominating his hand, I think in many ways, and the long little finger, he's in this to be heard, to be seen and be heard. I don't think he's in it to change the world or to do a great job. I think he wants to be famous.
Well, you know what's interesting too, Patty, is that in almost all people, in the flanges of their fingers, there tends to be a pattern of flanges that are longer, top, middle, or bottom. He's very balanced. He seems to
Hmm.
be almost a jack of all trades. He could be as much a great carpenter or gardener as he could be a presidential candidate.
Yes, he's, as we noticed in the beginning, good hands. I would look at his nails for carpenter. Have you ever noticed how big carpenter's nails usually are?
I
Just kind
haven't.
of, they have large nails. Something about that, just working away with wood, kind of a meditative. So the large nails kind of show that peacefulness.
So I guess from his hand, if we were to do maybe we should be doing this at the end of each one. Would you say, give a small personality description? He seems to be, say it.
I, I think he's friendly and outgoing, and I think he likes. I don't think he likes people in general, but I think he I think he
Hmm.
knows how to perform, to present himself. But I don't think he's warm and fuzzy. He has a good headline. It's a bit wavy, so he's moody. He can have attitudes, and we've seen that as well. Um, he has a loyalty line, which I saw earlier. I don't see it very. I do see it clearly in the middle bottom picture, and a little bit in the top right picture. So it's mostly in his. Showing up in his left hand. And the loyalty line is a parallel line. It's right by the thumb, and it runs parallel to the headline above. And one of the things I look at with that is who they're loyal to. So he is loyal. He would stand up for blood and close friendships, whether
And
they're
to his
right or
party.
wrong.
And to his
And to his
party.
party, yes. So he's not going to be a real lone wolf. He's not going to go off on his own. He will implement his upbringing, I think, into if he becomes presidency. He'll bring in his background because he's got these fixed ways of looking at things that have been in him for a long time, and he's not open to a lot of ideas outside of that.
And the fact that he's a kind of a jack of all trades indicates that if he were president, he might be somebody that works on all levels, would not want to just it would be hard to define him as just cerebral or as somebody that is one way or the other. He seems like he would have to get involved in everything.
In a sense of control, definitely. He micromanages.
Mm-hmm. Micromanager president. Okay, got it. Let's go to Hillary.
All right, Hillary. Hillary, we've had chances to look at her for years.
Yes, we have. And I know
Well-known hands.
Bernie's your guy, Hillary's my girl, so.
Oh, she's such a
Okay.
hawk. She likes
Uh-huh.
war. War lady. Oh gosh, looking at her hands, she has these long headlines in both hands, and in her right hand, I think it is, which one of them? Both of them have these Sydney lines. They're each one formed differently. And in her, let's see which one. Look at these close-ups. In her left hand, she has the Sydney line where the part of the headline comes over and does not directly connect or join the lifeline, so it's independent. And that usually adds kind of more the free spirit, thinking for herself, not so much caring what other people think. And in the left hand, it looks like it's a little closer, but still, it depends on which picture, and it probably depends on how she holds her hands as to whether that line, which crease kind of becomes dominant. So I think when the line looks like they're attached to each other, she's being more of a team player. And when she's holding her hands so the lines look like they're more disconnected, she's doing her own thing. And with that line going all the way across her hand like that in both hands, that's intense. That shows that she can put on these blinders when she's passionate about something and get obsessed and not notice anything else is happening except what she's involved in. That can be good in some ways.
Sounds like you're against Hillary.
Oh, let me find something good. She's
Oh, well,
no, I'm not against
my
Hillary.
feeling is that she's got a gardener's hand. She's got the square palm of someone that's not afraid to get dirty. She does seem to be somebody that looks as if she could get right into the muck and not worry about it. She has a widespread hand or thumb, which indicates to me that she's not afraid to talk about herself. And I also see her as somebody that probably, even though it's easy for her to talk to people, I still show her with her space between her little finger and her creativity finger as somebody that's still very exclusively in a small, tight circle of friends. And as far as I see that her little finger has not really got a bend in it, which says to me that she's somebody that probably lacks the drama and lacks the storytelling skills that many of the other people would have.
She's starting to get a little bit of arthritis in the little finger that's making it bend inward rather than sideways. So I think there is something about not being totally straightforward there. I think she can say what needs to be said when it's needed to be said, even if it's not true.
Okay.
Because I think that's a role that has to be played sometimes by our leaders, that they have to keep things secret for certain reasons. I think she's been Secretary of State. It'd be interesting to compare that little finger to see if it used to bend at the tip before she was Secretary of State, and that formed during that time period where she had to kind of learn what to say to who and when. I know she was
Well,
very
I would
upset when
say
her.
of all these people, she's probably had to practice and be in the spotlight far, far, far longer than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So probably that is true. Whereas the others, it would be completely a new experience.
Well, if you look at her thumb too, it tapered at the tip and thicker at the base. And when I see the base part, that middle section before it goes into the palm, as more about logic and reasoning, where the tip is more about will, and the tip would be relating to do it because I said so, where the base would be let me explain why it should be done my way. And that's the way she is. I think her husband was a lot like that. I really enjoyed that in Bill Clinton, that when things were going on, he would come out in front of the people and give you the background story, the fill you in. You didn't just get the what you're supposed to or what we think you need to be told, but he would give you an understanding or an explanation. And I would see that in her. Let me explain why it must be done this way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have Kasich. We have 11 minutes to do Kasich.
Oh my goodness. Where did the time go?
Okay. Kasich's hand, I thought it was a woman's hand when I first saw it. It's very long and tapered.
And he's got that gangly kind of hand, kind of like Bernie Sanders has, that long, kind of looks flexible, fingers. It's interesting in some of the pictures I found that his right hand, when he's holding it a certain way, and you can kind of see it in the lower left picture here, that his fingers bend. They kind of almost crinkle up.
And look at in this the one that goes in the far left, blue, light turquoise blue setting, almost looks like he can bend backwards.
Yeah, that hand does that in several pictures, but the left hand doesn't do it. And one of the things he talks about all the time is compromising, that you have to compromise. And I see bent fingers, and if they're double jointed, that would add even more that ability to compromise. But I think that adds to his ability to compromise. But in that same picture, look at his headline, heartline kind of joining together there. So like Hillary, another person with this line going clear across their hand. Intense.
And he also has the hitchhiker thumb.
Yep, bend back.
I'm out of here. So if anything goes and I see him as very social because he has a huge space between he doesn't hold his thumb very. It looks like he has a wide space between his thumb and his hand, which usually indicates a person that's not afraid to talk about themselves.
And confident. He's confident.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But why? But his wrist is so slim compared to his.
Well, I think he's a thinker. But he's got a little bit of it down. Well, on the left hand, his headline bends down, and in the right hand, it goes straight across the hand. I think it's a Sydney. Definitely, it's a Sydney in his right hand, and in his
definitely goes after what he wants.
So we've got several of these candidates with Sydney lines, intense. One of the biology books or medical books that I have on the creases that's not related to palmistry refers to people with these Sydney lines as having behavioral problems as kids. So I don't really think that they really have behavioral problems. I think they just act and think differently than everyone else.
Independent thinkers.
And people are trying to make them fit in.
One of the first things I wanted to say is we forgot to do a analysis of Hillary as president. What would you say? And then one of Kasich. So
Okay, I
Hillary,
think
we came
Hillary
out
would
with
be a
what?
good president. I really do think she would do fine, but I think she would be a continuation of what we have, that things would not change. The 1% will still do the 1% stuff. Everything will be the same, only it will be switched to the Democratic side. And just a few of the issues that are important to people on the Democratic side will be talked about. But I think, well, we're still on Democrat because Obama's Democrat, so what am I saying? But I think everything will be pretty much the same with her. I don't think we'll get a lot of changes.
Yeah,
I
but a
think
lot of us still love Obama. Yay, I do.
I enjoy Obama. I think I'm sorry that he wasn't able to get more done. That he was
Well,
dealing
honey, that's
with
what
so much.
happens when you become a puppet.
Yes, and
So
that's
my
why
feeling is that
yeah,
that's why they all do the talk, but when it gets down into doing the walk, then you've got Congress and you've got everybody against you. But I think they all do have wonderful dreams and wonderful desires, but they always end up disappointing because, and people go, why? Well, because you can only do so much. And my feeling is that Kasich, if we look at Kasich, I think that he would work very well with both parties, don't you?
yes. Well, I'm in Ohio, and he's our governor, and he is a good guy. I From the beginning, I thought he was, of all the people running, he's really the most, maybe not the most qualified, but he would be the best guy. He would turn out to be a really good, warm, friendly, caring president, and he would try to work with both sides, and he does believe in compromise. So I think he would be good. It's
I
interesting
do
that
too.
the Republican Party is kind of acting like they're going to sneak him in when it comes to the open convention. And you talked about him talking about himself, and I mentioned confidence. And he speaks like, even though he's running last, he talks as though when we get there, he's going to be the one.
And I would have to say that if I couldn't vote for Hillary, I think Kasich is pretty cool. And
I
I
agree with
know
you.
my husband, who is a diehard conservative Republican, absolutely hates him. He says he's a wuss. He says he doesn't. He's just there to take up, points and spaces for everybody else, and he needs to get out. But I don't know. I see that he could work with everybody.
I think so. I think so.
So
And
what
I
would
think
you?
Bernie can too. I think John is a nicer guy, more pleasant, easygoing. I think Bernie. I like Bernie's vision. I think Hillary is strong, and she's probably the most qualified of all of them. I think Trump scares me as the idea of being president. I think it's the rich kid, and this is the most, the top of the world for him, world leadership. So I don't think it's really about him caring about making America great again.
It's
I
about
don't know if
winning.
he can.
It's about winning.
It's about winning
Yeah, I think
the
his
trophy.
heart is in the right place. They say his kids are amazing. His wife is pretty cool, knows 5 languages. So there's got to be something inside all of that bragging that has to be able to be gentle and raise good kids and a good wife. But I think that his winning process tends to be very in the face.
Can you see them actually living in the White House? I mean, compared to where they live now, it would be like
The
slumming it.
penthouse. That's what somebody told me. They're afraid that they would decorate the White House as the Playboy Mansion.
Gilded, everything's gilded.
Gilded, yes.
Yeah.
Well, we have 4 minutes, and where can people reach you, Patty, if they want their palm read?
Well, they can go to my website, and that's ireadhands.com. And there's pages there that has how to contact me. I can read your hands. I can do it by Skype now.
I know it. I was going
Well,
to say,
that's in
if somebody
chat.
wanted to get their palm read, and can I ask what your price for palm reading is?
For a session with me locally, it's $90, and for over the internet, it's $100 because it takes a little bit longer. days, actually, where I'm done in an hour or so in person, and days, it seems like, over the internet. Have you had that where you're doing someone's online and you just keep looking at things? Well, you work as a psychic, so it's right then and there what you're doing, right? You don't have to wait for
No,
days
I
to.
do also email. I do computer palm reading, so that I ask people to send me 4 to 5 clear pictures of the side of their little finger, their thumb, their palm, and their wrist, and then I do readings by that. But I'm not. I do both, and so mine is more. Just the whole thing, where you are specifically very into that huge bookcase of knowledge behind you, and that just has to be worth a huge amount of money. So I'm really thankful that you were with me today. And if there was one thing that you would say about why you are a palm reader, why is this your mission, what would it be?
I love it. And I can't tell you why, other than that interaction with people, the feedback, the feeling of saying something. Sometimes it's profound, but it's fun to interpret the features in the hands. When I was little, I thought that someday I was going to interpret the hieroglyphics when I grew up, and found out they'd already been interpreted, or translated. So I think that's what I'm doing with the hands, is translating the
The
different features and
hieroglyphics of the
markings.
hand.
Yes, it's a hieroglyphic hand.
And for you, it sounds like it's very much about a more informative, knowledgeable study of character. It sounds like you are very, I don't want to say it. There's the old-fashioned way of palm reading, and you're very much into the modern way, I believe.
I don't do the coaching, which has become more the modern way. It's more diagnostic, I guess. What I do is tell people what I see, what it represents, but I don't tell them really what to do with it. I'm noticing people are starting to want that more. Like, what do I do with this now that I have this information? How do I live my life based on this? Now that I know who I am. I'm not sure if I'll go down that path. I might, just refer people to others that do that. What I love the most, though, is the interpretive and figuring it out, and people being totally amazed that how can you know that about me? Either
Isn't that
they
fun?
spent time in therapy and months in therapy, and in 5-10 minutes, I'm like tuning right into what it's taken them a really long time to figure out in themselves. And also, what I love most too is, it gives people a sense of, that's me. It's okay to be me. This is who I'm born to be. And you can kind of see how they've twisted themselves sometimes to be what they think others want them to be. So you can kind of divide that, and this is who you really are, and this is who
All
you're
right.
not.
Well, we've got 18 seconds left to close. And,
Thank you.
you were awesome. And thank you so much. We didn't crash even once. Bye.
Goodbye. I've had fun being here.
Psychic radio, holistic radio, spiritual radio. This is AchieveRadio.com. Follow us on Twitter at Twitter.